Welcome back to Our Life Simplified. I'm kind of excited today due to number one, showing you how overgrown my garden is. Everything is thriving. I still don't have things planted in here that I wanted to. Every year that I have a garden, I always look at what the garden has produced for me, and I make my decisions as to what I plan on doing differently next year. As you can see, there are beans growing up. These were actually volunteer beans that came back last year. I went ahead and I waited until a bean pod got really overripe, and I planted some more seeds over on this side so it will grow up on this trellis up and over. There was a volunteer bean plant that came up here. All of this, you can't even see my sign anymore. So if you go back and look at my earlier videos on my garden, you'll be able to see how sparse this really was before it all got started. But all of this green right now that's covering my sign, that is asparagus fern. I'm gonna wait until that browns up before I cut all that back. I even had in there a tomato plant that was a volunteer plant that came back. Have some beans growing up here. You can see some of them right there. I've already harvested some. I try to harvest what I can reach. I could probably reach that if I jump up. Anyways, I have all of my tomato plants, and I hate to say this, but I know in my earlier videos I was bragging on these bamboo stakes and how well they do, and they normally do, but this year the tomato plants have just gotten so enormous that they have fallen over, so I definitely have to do something different with this next year. My tomatillo plants, which is what this video is really all about, have gotten so big and they're falling over. You can see how a lot of them have flopped over. They all were the size of this. I don't know if you can see how big and tall it is, almost the size of the height of the trellis, which is, I'm guessing, probably about 9 foot or so. Let's see if this is a better view. A lot of the stems have kind of fallen over, and I have some tomato plants in here. Anyways, I apologize. This is such a mess this year, but I definitely have ideas of what I'm going to do different next year. These tomatillo plants were actually over in this section, actually in the center bed here in this section, and it just went crazy. So I decided I was going to move it to this section because I have a walkway here and get to it from this side, and then there's a walkway on that other side and I can get to it from there too, because I knew it was going to get big. This monstrosity right here is only 2 plants. Tomatillo plants get so big, and I wanted to show you when it was time to harvest. This is how you know it's time to harvest. There's this papery husk that's on the outside, and when it starts to split, then you know it's ready. So I'm gonna pop that off, and I've already harvested a bunch of them. Like this one isn't ready yet. I can kind of pinch it, and I can feel it growing in there, but it's not quite busting out of its seams, so to speak. So here's another one that's ready to harvest. You can see where it's kind of busting out of the seams. So I'm going to pick that. Check out this carrot. I usually don't do well with carrots, which I plan on doing something a little different with carrots this year. So I can hopefully get more. I got some, but not a whole lot. Let me see if I can find some more tomatillos. I just can't believe how big these have gotten. So this one looks pretty firm, but I could probably take this one. I don't know if you can see, it's kind of sort of busting out the seam. And here's a good one right here. This one's really busting out the seams, so I'm going to harvest that one. Here's another one. See, I have my basil here. I can smell it. I keep brushing up against it and I can smell it. It smells amazing. I even have the tomatillo. It's growing in through this trellis, and then I even have my tomato plants growing in through this trellis, along with the beans. I don't know if you can see those. So I have those, and there's more down underneath there. Real quick, I want to show you some of my tomatoes. I have some blushing. I'm going to leave them on a little bit longer. Check this one out. This one is blushing. I don't know if you can see how big this is. It is enormous. I'm going to guess it's at least probably 6 inches wide or so. It's huge. And this was my classic beefsteak from Baker's Creek. I planted some other beefsteaks, but they didn't quite get that large. Oh, these are my Cherokee purples. These are one of my favorites. I see that it's kind of blushing, but I'm gonna wait a little bit longer. So I'm in the kitchen here. I've already harvested my tomatillos, and I talked to you about my other vegetables that I've harvested, and including onions and garlic. I'm going to be making the Salsa Verde, which is that green salsa sauce that you might find in a Mexican restaurant. If you weren't sure about that, I'm going to be making that 2 different ways. Neither of these ways is for canning, so I just want to get that out of the way. But the first way I'm going to be doing this and preparing it is where I'm going to roast all the vegetables in the oven. The other way is going to be in a pan. So let me go ahead and I will get started with cleaning the tomatillos. I have to take the husk off and rinse them off and dry them off and get them on the pan along with the jalapeño, garlic, onion, and for roasting. So let me do that and I'll be right back. So I'm going to demonstrate how I clean the tomatillos. This papery husk, you're just going to pull that back. It's somewhat sticky, so you're just gonna have to kind of work at getting that paper husk off. And then I'll have to also go through and make sure I have all good clean ones without blemishes. But it's kind of sticky, so that's why you want to take the husk off and then of course rinse it off. I'm going to continue doing that until I get all of these cleaned up, rinsed off, and dried off, and I will be right back and show you the next step. So I have all the tomatillos on the paper towel now, and I'm just patting it dry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just leave them whole. I've seen recipes where you can cut them in half right before you roast them, but I am just going to add some extra virgin olive oil to my cookie sheet and rub that in just to get a good coating to help prevent some sticking. If you'd like to use aluminum foil, you are more than welcome to. So I'm using approximately 1 pound of the tomatillos. Now in this recipe that I'm looking at, it does say to add the garlic raw after everything's done cooking, but I'm going to do both. I love garlic, so I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of cloves of garlic to the pan and let that roast up, and then I will also put some raw garlic in the blender at the end. But let me go ahead and get this started. I will also be rough chopping, like maybe quarter some white onions and roasting that as well all together. So I want to show you the beautiful garlic that I braided with part of my 100 plus bulb harvest. I'll link those videos in the description box below if you're interested in watching that. I'm just going to throw a couple of cloves of garlic on there. And I'm gonna add a couple of jalapeños. Again, all of this is from my garden. So I'm gonna leave seeds and all in it because we do like spice. I'm just gonna chop off the top, but I will leave the seeds in there, so I'll pop that on there. So I have 4 onions. I think I'm going to put, these are onions that I grew in my garden. These happen to just be smaller onions. So I'm gonna use these up first before I use up the bigger ones because the bigger ones can store better. So I am just going to rough chop this and place it on the cookie sheet. And if I feel like it needs a little bit more onion flavor, I will go ahead and add that at the end with raw onions. And the reason why I decided to make this today is because Todd is going to be making street tacos for us, and I thought this would be a perfect addition to the street tacos as a condiment. And why not, right? I already grew the vegetables. Let's not waste it. So I have all of these on the cookie sheet. I'm just going to drizzle some olive oil over it, and I'm going to mix them together with my hands. I'm going to add a little bit of salt, pepper, garlic. I call it the Trifecta Seasoning. I'm sure you've seen it and people have probably private labeled them, but it's honestly, it's so easy to make at home. It's just equal parts salt, pepper, and granulated garlic. I am just going to sprinkle this over our veggies, mix it in one more time. So this is going to go in a 425-degree oven for approximately 15 minutes. Okay, the timer just went off and oh my goodness, you can hear it sizzling. I'm going to go ahead and just set it on the stove right now because I'm getting ready to start the second one in the pan, but I'm going to let this set just for a few minutes to kind of cool before I place it in the blender with the remaining ingredients. I'm going to go ahead and transfer this into the blender. So I have it in the blender. I'm going to add approximately a half a cup of cilantro. The recipe calls for a tablespoon of lime juice, but I'm just going to squeeze a half lime and see how that works. When I cook, a lot of the times I don't always follow a recipe. I go by taste. I have equal parts salt, pepper mixed together, so I'm just going to add a little bit of that. Place my lid on and pulse it. Gonna do the smell test, and it smells amazing. Check that out. So it is still hot. Smells amazing. I'm going to give it a quick taste test. I think I'm going to add a little bit more cilantro to that. And I have a couple of raw garlics in here. I'm going to probably, I'll start with the bigger piece. I'm going to throw that in. Pulse it again. Tastes really good. A little bit more salt, pepper. There you have it. Super easy salsa verde. Of course, we're going to let this set and cool before we serve it and use it as a condiment on our street tacos. But this is a super easy, super quick way of making salsa verde yourself. And I'm not sure how much it costs in the store. I'll have to do some research and check that out, but all the ingredients in here were from my garden, except cilantro. Unfortunately, my cilantro, since it's been so hot, has started to go to seed, so we had to buy some cilantro and lime. Otherwise, everything else we had, and everything I have is super easy to grow as well. You should really consider growing all these ingredients yourself. Super, super easy, super yummy. All right, so that's the first one. I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to make a second version, which should be very similar. It's just making it on the stove. Okay, so our second easy salsa verde recipe, we're going to do it on the stove in a pan. Going to put it on high, add olive oil to the pan. I'm going to be adding the tomatillos, jalapeno, and onion. I went ahead and just rough chopped it. I cut most of the tomatillos in half, and I either halved or quartered the little onions I had, and I chopped up the jalapenos here. I do have a couple of, like a clove and a half of garlic that I'm going to be adding to this as well. So all that's going to go into the pan. We're going to heat that up. So in any of these salsa verde recipes, you could use other peppers if you would like. I know I've seen serrano peppers as an example, jalapeno, it's whatever your flavor is. If you want it spicier, leave the seeds in. If you don't want it so spicy, remove the seeds. Whenever you roast the vegetables, that will help tone down some of the flavors. So if you want it bigger kick and more spice, then wait to add the raw jalapenos to the blender. Same with the onions and garlic. But as you've seen me do, I did a little bit of mix. I roasted some when I did the roasting, and then I added raw to the blender. And in the pan, I'm doing the same thing. I do have some of the garlic I added to this pan, but I'm saving some for the end because I do want to go ahead and have a little bit of a kick to it. And I might do the same for the jalapeno as well. All depends on the flavor. So you can hear it searing in the pan. Just going to add a little bit of my salt and pepper. You will notice I slightly changed a little bit because this is my liking. I know some of the recipes say that you can use cumin. I don't like cumin, so I don't add that to my salsa verde. So we're just going to stir and cook until they start browning, and when they are soft and browned, I will go ahead and take it off the heat, add it to the blender, and I'll be right back. Okay, so it is starting to caramelize really well. I'm going to go ahead and just take this off the heat. I know it's not completely browned, but I'm going to take it off the heat, add it to the blender, and add the lime juice, cilantro, and I will go by taste. If it needs anything else, I'll be adding some raw stuff such as the garlic, onions, and possibly jalapeno. So I am going to add this to the blender with a little bit of lime juice and about a half cup or so of cilantro. And I'm going to go ahead and add a couple of garlic cloves while I blend, and a little bit of salt and pepper. So I think I'm going to add, I had a little bit of red onion in the refrigerator and I just need to use some of it up. So I'm just going to add just a little bit of the red onion, and I'm going to add a little bit of the jalapeno and another clove of garlic. I told you I love garlic. I love garlic. In goes the onion. In goes the jalapeno. A little bit more cilantro. Add the lid. Pulse. Oh, and that is super good. So there you have it. 2 different ways of making the salsa verde. I actually think this one's better than the other, even though they're similar ingredients. I added a little bit more of the pepper and red onion this time, and garlic, and it is very, very good. But it's super easy to make. Once you have your salsa verde already mixed up, you can go ahead and you can put it in a mason jar or a canning jar. Now keep in mind, this is not the same recipe you would use for canning. you would have to add some kind of acid like a vinegar or something like that. And there are recipes out there for that. But I do store my various foods in jars, with the canning jars without going through the whole canning process. So I am just going to add this to the jars. Okay. So I thought I was going to need 2 jars, but I don't. So this is from the first recipe, which is where I roasted the vegetables, and this one is from the stovetop in the pan. So I have 2 delicious jars of salsa verde, but this is the roasted salsa verde and this is stovetop salsa verde. Now I will store this in the refrigerator, maybe up to a couple of weeks at the most. It won't store for a long term like it would if it was canned, but what I might do is I might place these in smaller containers and give them away to people, because I don't think the 3 of us are going to be able to eat both of these jars in a matter of 2 weeks, but we'll see. I hope you like this video. If so, be sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to continue following me on my garden journey, cooking journey, woodworking or other, please be sure you subscribe. And until next time, thank you for watching.